Come on, sit down. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, everybody. This is listed on your programme as a fireside chat. Please just sit down. As a fireside chat, you will note that there is no fire here, save for the smouldering hot takes that you are going to see dispensed from my next guest, which is Emma Edhem. Emma is an alderman of the City of London. She and I serve together on the Court of Aldermen. She is a professor in practice at the University of Durham in finance. She sits on the City of London's Economic and Regulatory Crime Board, particularly with an interest in cyber. And she is the Secretary General of the World Cyber Organization. So she's going to tell us all about those things as I interview her in this fireside chat. So, Emma, my connection with you is that we serve together on the Court of Aldermen. And very few people, I imagine almost nobody in this room, even knows what the Court of Aldermen is. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about it and about your work in the city.
Matthew, thank you very much for that. I have to say I'm still learning, and I've been there for about 9 years now. The Court of Aldermen is the upper house of the City of London Corporation. The City of London Corporation is a sovereign city that is inside of the Greater London. We basically house the financial, legal, professional services mile. And we are elected politicians. We are sovereign, meaning that we answer to His Majesty the King. We have our own laws, our own politicians, we have our own courts and our own police force, which is what I sit on, in fact. We are the envoys and the ambassadors for financial, legal, professional services internationally, as well as nationally. But we also have some work that we do in the vicinity, that is local authority. We oversee the Common Councilman. And as you said, you and I both sat when you were an alderman. They forgot to mention that he was an alderman before in the long list that they gave for Matthew, but Matthew's probably done just about everything on this planet. You really take my breath away, Matthew, and I kind of feel a little bit underqualified sitting next to you. But yes, it is a political seat.
So you sit on the City of London's Economic Crime and Cybercrime Authority. Can you tell us a little bit about trends you're seeing in cybercrime, economic crime, and where those two overlap, particularly in the crypto space?
It's the board to the local authorities, so I'm not actually we're not in the police force, but we are a board on the authority itself. When I started sitting on the board, this was quite some years ago, we saw that there was almost an exponential rise in economic crime transitioning into cybercrime. And we moved away from the run-of-the-mill, what I call the violence, from physical harm, if you will, burglaries, etc., that you will see in the rest of the country. We hurtled in extraordinary speed towards cybercrime, cyber and tech took off in a really big way. It's got to a stage where we, of course, collaborate with police forces around the globe. And it's got to a stage where, as we take the data from other countries that we share, we are seeing almost a phenomenal, almost impossible incoming crime in terms of cyber, which is almost near impossible to keep under control. It is quite concerning. Sometimes we wonder if it's become an everland. I came in fact, just earlier, just as somebody was saying it's not the lawyer's fault. I'm glad it's not the lawyer's fault, because lawyers are always blamed, and I'm a barrister, I'm a lawyer as well. So it's nice to hear somebody saying it's not always the lawyer's fault. In fact, what we see is no matter how much we try to regulate, no matter how much we try to put the boundaries in, how can we police, how can we prevent these cyber crimes when it is human fighting cyber? And here is where some of the problems that we have. It's almost a race against time. Every time we think that we've closed one door, another door is going to open. And no matter how many times we put the most extraordinary goalkeepers in front of that goal, we can put 10 of them, 20 of them, in one match in front of the goal, one ball is going to get through. And if the ball is huge, and it can have a devastating effect. And it's not necessarily just on companies, not just on businesses, not even just on individuals, but it can have a devastating effect on the entire economy. And this is, in fact, where we are at the moment. And it is a very worrying trend indeed. The question is, how are we going to prevent that? If we can't always police it, how are we going to prevent that? We need to put all sorts of measures in place. I have certain views of how we're going to progress forward, and it isn't going to be just closing the door after the horse is bolted. It's my view that we have to start looking in more concentrated ways on how to close that door before that horse gets out. And if that means not just regulation, and regulation isn't the answer to everything. The quantity of regulation isn't the answer to everything. It is the quality. And of course, cyber has no boundaries. Cyber has no jurisdictional boundaries. It is global. So unless we can all collaborate globally, and even if we have the best regulation in the world, we are still going to find that we're going to be hit time and time again, unless the globe gets together and starts to collaborate.
So this audience is comprised of founders, funders, people with a general interest in crypto and fintech. What is it that they can do to assist in that process, and what can you do for them? What can the City of London Police do for them to help provide a better environment in which they can practice their craft, to provide more consumer confidence in crypto products, to ensure that they're not going to be the victim of the next massive cyber attack?
Well, first and foremost, at the very top of the agenda has to be education. We find that the greater problem arises from the individuals within the organizations themselves. It's not your systems, not always your systems, because sometimes, of course, you even though you can't always keep up to date with the most extraordinary trends that those who mean harm develop, but it's the individuals. And we found that sometimes there is a lack of chain of command, where at the very top, there will be somebody who is genius in business. It's not always a technical person who's going to be at the very top. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But the chairman, the CEO, what we sometimes do find, in fact, frequently we find, is that the security side has been almost exclusively brushed over to an expert who is in the organization and knows everything there is genius in terms of security. They have all the right terminology, they have all the right knowledge, and even they are trying to keep up to date with it. But unless the general at the top himself understands what the soldier at the sort of somewhere in the middle is doing, then that chain of command is lost. And so we created something in the City Police called Cyber Griffin. It started very small, it's growing by the day. And Cyber Griffin is helping those at the very top understand how a chain of command would work when there is an attack, and what are the measures one can take if there is an attack. We have specialist police officers. We subsidize these police officers to go into your organizations and to, in a closed-door scenario, not only to look at your systems, but also to help you understand how you can start to deliver on some of the safety and security issues they will identify. When I say closed door, it stays with them. They don't reveal this to anybody else. There's a number of programs that we've developed within, when I say we, I mean my genius police officers. There's a number of programs that they've developed within Cyber Griffin, and some of those would be not necessarily for the chairman and the CEOs, but it could be further down the chain. It could be somebody as simple as a facilities manager who may be in front of the computer and will click onto something. It could be something as simple as that. But if you are developing technology and you are developing AI that is hot topic at the moment, which is cryptocurrency, I can assure you that there are not only terrorist gang leaders, but also hostile jurisdictions that are going to be very interested in you and the technology that you have and the platforms that you've developed. You're probably almost certainly going to find they're so sophisticated, no matter how sophisticated you think your systems are, you're going to find that they've been sitting in your systems for some time, actually monitoring what you've been doing. And it may take you some time to be able to discover that. Let's assume for one moment that it's a hostile jurisdiction and they have been gathering your methods, your codes, whatever it is that you've been developing. What happens then? So first and foremost, it's going to be chain of command, but then we also have to educate those that you might not ordinarily associate with the safety issues. And so we have tabletop exercises. We have from the more complex exercises to the most simplest of exercises, really trying to teach your average person as well as those who are very technical in the ways and the new issues that constantly arise.
So you've talked a little bit about nation-state threat actors, and I want to focus on that a little bit. So your second hat is that you are a barrister practicing in international law, in fact, quite a distinguished barrister, one of the few actual distinguished barristers at Gray's Inn, master of the bench there, and working in international geopolitical law, where that intersects with the work we're doing in crypto and cyber. What do you think are the jurisdictional threats, the nation-state level threats that will become more obvious over the next 5 years?
Jurisdictional issues is one of the most complex topics because we're not just talking about AI or crypto or cyber. We are talking about the psychology and the culture of countries, and we are talking about international play. And because of the complexities of international play, that very question is complex in itself. We already see it. We already see, I'm not going to be mentioning any particular countries, but we already see certain important countries who should be friends sitting inside the systems of our businesses. Industrial espionage, I think, is the best way to put it. We already know about it. We already see it. We already try to eradicate it whenever we see it, or at least dilute it to an extent. It's sometimes near impossible because that is international play. That is what that is. We're not going to be able to take care of international play through policing. What do we do if we see that there is a country who is an ally or sometimes even a hostile country inside a business system? What do we do? Does the UK or the police then suddenly turn around and say, well, I'm not going to do business with that country anymore? It just doesn't work that way. We have to be very careful how we are going to be able to deal. We just need to keep on developing. We need to keep on educating. I actually cannot emphasize that enough, that if we cannot keep on finding new ways to alert you and to get, not just you, but those within your companies. As I've said, it could be your PA, because they know they can't get through to you. You may be more sophisticated, and you almost certainly are, and they're going to go for your weakest link. And this is how they're going to get into your system. And through your weakest link, they're going to get through to you. And through you, they're going to then get to others. This is how they're going to do it.
I recall receiving a briefing when I was on the Court of Aldermen that there are more spies currently operating in London than there were during the height of the Cold War. And that's largely about industrial secrets and industrial espionage. And everyone in this room will be concerned that their intellectual property, that the projects they're working on remains as secret as possible. And based on what you've said, it's a pretty grim outlook for that being possible. What are their mitigation steps to prevent the loss of valuable technology, valuable intellectual property that the people in this room are working on.
Can I actually start with and answering that with just putting a little bit more fear into why as if there isn't enough already. There was one jurisdiction which I was called in to advise the government. And what I had seen is this. There was some poverty in certain parts of that country, not all of it, some parts of that country. And they couldn't understand how they were going to take that part of their country out of poverty. And they came up with a genius idea that if they were to start their children in that part of the country as young as 3 years old, to teach them how to code, start them with coding. If they start at 3 years old, as they come up through the years, it will become second nature to them. And they will become at the forefront of cyber. They will be at the forefront of security and developments in all matters cyber and, of course, tech. And this is what I warned the minister at the time, which is up until the age of 10, children have a state that we call Doli Incapax. We like Latin in the UK, and we throw it into everything. You may recall from your days as a lawyer. What that means is children under the age of 10 are incapable of understanding the difference between right and wrong. Now, you'll be saying, how can that be? But one thing I can assure you is, if they do the right thing, it's because they were told that they must do the right thing. They were, mum and dad, or whoever the personal authority has said, this is how you do it and this is what you must do. And if you don't, you're going to be punished. Then they reach this grey area between the ages of 10 and 14, when they are starting to develop the concept of right and wrong. So, in other words, no concept, everything is literal before the age of 10, between 10 and 14, then you hit that age of concept, where they will then start to be able to ascertain right and wrong themselves. Roughly, though there is no real cutoff point, after 14, hopefully, unless there is elements of psychological neurodiversity, which some neurodiversity prevents people adults from being able to develop concept, they should be able to develop these concepts. So we know in our city police and police around the world, in fact, that under the age of 10, there is a concept known as script kiddies. That is, young children who do not know that as they're quite sophisticated in some of them in already coding, because they may be geniuses, and they will hack into systems, not realizing the devastation that they're going to cause. If you were to teach a child as young as 3 to start learning to code, you might as well put a loaded gun in the hand of that child as it grows up and say, don't shoot. And it's not that the child is going to, even though it may, shoot outside. It may turn around and shoot you, but it didn't mean to. And herein lies the problem. So how do we fight this? Well, all I can do is, in my circumstance, in that circumstance, was put the fear into that state. You can put food in the belly of those who were in poverty in your country. But as you are putting food in the belly of those in your country, you may find that the very food that you're putting is actually going to turn around and it's going to destroy you instead. So I left them with that, and I do understand that they haven't decided, they've now decided they are not going to start their children as young as 3 years old. But what can you do? I know you're going to, because you've already mentioned it, and I know you're going to ask me, I'm sure you're going to ask me about the World Cyber Organization, but this is one of the things that we are actually looking at. And this is, this is a complex machinery that we are looking. There's no one answer. If I was to say, please, we have to keep on at the forefront of what is happening globally. And as I say, it's not what's happening in the UK. It's not what's happening in our neighbor. It's not what's happening across the globe. You could be attacked from all sides. And unless there is a body, or unless there is a group of bodies coming together to be able to share that information in a very concentrated way, and unless we are going to be able to find ways to be able to feed that information to all of you, and unless we are going to find ways to be able to say, it's not just you, let's not be siloed. You may protect yourself, but as you're protecting yourself, unless we all come together to protect you as well, and I don't mean the police, I don't mean the World Cyber Organization, I don't mean, which is very embryonic, I don't mean other law enforcement agencies, I don't mean security agencies. I mean that unless all of the organizations who are good and legitimate organizations get together and say, almost, all for one and one for all. If you're attacked, we must all come down. We must all come around whoever is being attacked and eradicate as much as we possibly can, whatever it is that is attacking the business, the individual. So there is not one answer. There are going to be many different combinations, permutations, and factors that we are going to have to put together into one big pot. And do you know what? We're going to get it wrong as well, because it's just too fast moving. And what we are going to do instead is that the moment, we just have to be fast acting. We just have to keep on moving forward. And we really just have to make sure that we all act as one. And I think unless we have unity, we are going to keep on suffering.
Well, that's a great segue into my next topic, which is the World Cyber Organization. And you serve as the Secretary General of that organization. So tell us a little bit about the work that the World Cyber Organization is doing, how it can benefit the work that everyone in this room is doing, and conversely, what everyone in this room can do to benefit your work.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matt. If I can again start with how it all came about and why it came about. A few years ago, I ended up it was a pretty, again, I'm not permitted to say who it is, but there was a pretty major organization on cyber policing type organization. I came inside and I thought, this is near impossible. We can't, this is not going to work. So I stayed there for a short while, but it helped me understand the utter total sheer dangers of what is going on around the globe today. It was almost like a crash course, if you will, in the dangers today. But when I came out, I thought, it's not just the dangers. What can we do to make sure that we are enabling the right organizations? And that was at the forefront of my mind, in addition to the security issues we had. And then I was approached by a number of people, should we create some form of a policing organization? My answer was no. I don't think we should. I think instead, what we should be doing is we should be looking across the board at what cyber actually requires today, which is more than policing. So when we came together, and in fact, one of the things that we did see, and I'm sure you heard from previous speakers, is wallets that are created, this is what we saw, wallets created by some artificial intelligence. They go out into legitimate wallets on a daily basis, and they will come back and siphon off part or all of the legitimate funds or the legitimate crypto from those wallets into whatever the wallet is. What then happens is, of course, that shatters. The AI itself will shatter and disseminate the crypto into thousands of pieces, and then again, and then again. It's like dust. So you take a piece, and then it becomes dust. And then it's near impossible because there is no resources to be able to find and trace. We can find and trace some. I mean, even in economic crime, which isn't cyber, we're only looking at the tip of the iceberg half the time. Now add cyber to that mix, where you've got crypto that's just shattered into powder. Try and trace each one of those little pieces of powder to see what you're going to find and where it's all gone to before it comes back into wherever it needs to come back. And no human needs to do it because they've created AI to do it. And what was alarming to us is that we actually saw on a weekly basis, and this was just one of the wallets we found, was around 1.2, 1.3 billion per week. Now, the more we looked, the more we realized that from terrorists to gangs to whoever it is that has nefarious conscience or activities, we found that there's trillions somewhere here in the dark world waiting to come up to the surface. It really concerns us because if at the moment we know that there are people that should not, or organizations, minds, that are dishonest and downright dangerous, that is stockpiling, knowing that one day, just one day, it could be tomorrow, it could be 10 years from now, it could be 20 years from now, they don't care. But when it is that can now start to surface, not in little bits and pieces, not in limited amounts, but actually starts to become the legal tender of choice. Can you imagine there is more in that underground world than there is fiat currency right now? What's going to happen when the real riches turn the other way round? If we finally find that suddenly it's capable of being brought in fast, hurtling leaps and bounds into the surface. So this is when we thought we really do have to do something. We created 3 platforms. It's very embryonic, hot off the press, by the way. You're all getting this. It hasn't yet been properly or formally announced, but we've got 3 platforms. The first one was the World Cyber Standards Commission. We know that if we were to go out into the big wide world and we were to say to other countries, we want you to here we have collated as much as we possibly can in regulations and laws, and we want you to adopt these. The answer is going to be no, because each country knows better than the other, or at least that's what they think. And they're going to be very protectionist, and they're going to want to be the one at the forefront. So instead, I did the only thing that was left open to me. I went to the insurance companies, and I said to the insurance companies who right now are saying, the pool in all matters cyber is going to have to shrink because we actually can't afford it anymore. And I said, instead of shrinking your pool, why don't we come up with another solution? And the solution is bring your companies together. Let's start to look. This is going to be industry-led. This is not government. We've already spoken to various industries from finance to energy to retail to pharmaceuticals who are all screaming this should have been done 25 years ago. And what we said to the insurance companies is, bring us your best practices combined. Each of them have already developed best practices. But we are saying, don't silo yourselves off, which is what they're doing, not intentionally, because they just created their own. Put your best practices together. There's going to be a Venn diagram. We're going to find some commonality. And with that commonality, let's thrash it out. Whatever we come up with, and again, it's not going to be perfect, because unless you put it into practice, it doesn't matter how many times we sit there and we theorize. Unless it's out there, we could get it wrong. So let's start putting it out there, and we will call it our best practices. And we will have formulas, insurance companies already have some formulas, but let's create the formulas where if organizations, this is for your benefit, people's benefit, the globe's benefit. Let's put those best practices into practice. And if an organization veers away from best practices, then the insurance companies will come up with their own formulas, whether it is going to be non-insurable at all, or maybe higher premiums, whatever their formula is that they're going to come up with. So that is number one. And once we have best practices, and this isn't going to be the first time, and they work, they've been put to the test and they work, then we will find that jurisdictions often follow suit. Then we have the enabling platform, the Institute. The Institute is to declutter. Mind you, the Standards Commission is decluttering as well. We often hear, when we go out and about talking to various cybersecurity companies, but this is already a cluttered space. No, this is a crowded space. And I say, no, it's not, it's a cluttered space. Cluttered means that there are those that shouldn't be there. Because some of those organizations are the problems themselves. We need to start to declutter. And as we declutter, let's enable the best ones. There are those that should be enabled, but they don't know how to move any further. It could be they have the most amazing technical brains, but they don't know how to drive the business. Let's find ways to actually move that forward for them. But most importantly within the Institute is going to be this education. Knowledge, education, bringing to the forefront of everybody's minds. What are the issues right now? What is the next steps? What is, if somebody is being attacked, what are the, from your Pegasus to whatever it is? It's not just those that read their cyber magazines. It needs to be your average person on the street that will also know that if you do X, Y, and Z, this is what's going to happen to you, and this is what's going to happen to your system. And then we also have a court. One of the things we recognized is that it is almost near impossible to have a court for something like cyber with human judges, because we just don't have enough of them. And even though they are amazing, we need to start developing cyber judges. And we are already developing our cyber contracts, but we can combine those with our human judges, if you will. And as technology and cyber develops, then the courts will develop as well. So those are currently our 3 platforms. But we need more ideas. We need, the more input we have, we are going to miss things. We are not always going to get it right. We want to hear from you. We want to see what your views are. We may take some of them, we may not take others. And if we've missed something, we just want to hear what you have to say. And sometimes we may even tweak what you have to say because it may be just a variation, given that we're going to put everything together. We're not creating the wheel, by the way. We are more likely than not taking a whole load of organizations and putting them together. And then there may be a little bit of addition in there as well. So we would love to be able to hear from you if you have views. You might say, well, why don't you think about adding X, Y, and Z into cyber court? But you'll, as lawyers, will cyber courts work? I have my reservations. It all depends on what the coding is. We know that what you input into your codes and who inputs into the codes could actually make all the difference. Of course, we're going to have dangers. What if we start finding that only certain people, certain demographics or certain diversities are not making it when it comes to the decisions in our cyber courts. These are all of the things that we still need to look at. As I've said, we're at the very beginning. We are just starting to come up with the melting pots, the ideas, and then we are going to be putting it all together. It's a big, huge, enormous job. The more the merrier, is all I can say.
Emma, we're coming to the end of our time, and I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions from the audience. So I wonder if you could very briefly just address my final question, which is, you're a professor at Durham, which is a all right university. And
it's better than Oxford.
And I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing in educating young people and your professorship is in the practice of finance. And I wonder if you could tell me what you're doing to educate people about changes in finance, changes in fintech, the way that the world and the whole financial system of the world is really on its way to being upended, and the lessons they may have received in the past just aren't buying it.
Absolutely, thank you. I think that's a very good question indeed. And in fact, I am also doing International Mentor at Cambridge. So two very good universities. We'll put Oxford aside for now. So, but let's start with Durham, which is where I'm really concentrated. And what we have now started to, and that's why I'm there. We're called Professors in Practice. So we don't lecture on the undergraduate technical, the undergraduate courses. What we do is there's two Professors in Practice, and we bring the knowledge that we have, if you will, globally, and just our experiences is what we bring. And one of the things I've noticed, not just Durham, but I've had a look at other universities as well, is that finance is moving forward, not just crypto, but we're talking about digital currencies. We're going beyond crypto to the US and even the UK, talking about the digital currencies, and in fact other jurisdictions. So fintech, we're talking fintech. And when we come to talking these are our future financiers in this degree, or in these courses. And when they leave university, given everything that we know about what is happening in the globe right now, I find it quite remarkable that we are still not getting through into our courses security. And I'm not talking about, when I say fintech, I'm not talking about the technical side. The students, the finance students, don't need to code. What the finance students really must do is understand exactly how the digital age works for them. And I am amazed when I look into our universities in the UK. I haven't yet looked into the US, but I might have a peek there as well. But what I am really amazed at is we need to start changing that mentality. We really do need to start moving away. When I say digital, let's not talk coding, let's just talk about awareness and what it all means. And they need to be proficient. Students, young financiers, must be proficient when it comes to all matters digital and security, very much so.
Well, I'm afraid that I did want to take some questions from the crowd, but we've completely run out of time. But Emma, if you will condescend to spend a little bit of time with us after this and the networking after this event, I'm sure everyone would have a chance to talk to you then.
Absolute pleasure.
But Emma, on behalf of Brown Rudnick and everybody here, I want to thank you very much for giving us your time, and thank you for coming to speak to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.